Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast where Jank is our policy and we only have one rule. No experts allowed. With new and improved audio settings.
Woo.
Hello world.
Now you can hear how truly awful I sound.
And that's fair. That's a fair assessment. So, first order of business for the podcast, emergency meeting. Boys and girls, emergency meeting. Because Wizards of the Coast is doing their first big action as Wizards of the Coast doing the Commanders thing. They've introduced a bracket system for Commander, for casual Commander. It just recently came out, I think a week or two ago as of the date of recording.
I want to say just a week.
I'll say it probably has been just a week. But I had some thoughts, I had some impressions, and I'm curious to see what you think, Benjamin. So first and foremost, let's go over the whole spiel. I got a whole thing on my phone here. Don't mind my unprofessionalism. So Wizards has recently said, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to give you guys brackets to go ahead and to kind of dictate the kind of power of your decks, to help people have a better Rule Zero conversation, to dictate the power of their decks. And they've broken it up into 5 brackets. I'm going to argue about that later, but we're going to go into what they said. So they have the first of 5 brackets, and they're essentially in order from lowest to highest in power level. The first of them being exhibition. Essentially, hey, this is supposed to be just for funsies, for kicks and giggles, and their specific wording on it was your ultra casual commander deck. So no mass land denial. They have these specific things that they've listed on it, and we'll probably put it up in the podcast thing so you guys can see it, but no mass land denial, no 2-card infinite combos, no game changers, we'll get to that in a minute, and few tutors. After that is core, which is the average current pre-constructed deck. I also have issues with that. But it says no mass land denial, no chaining extra turns, no 2-card infinite combos, no game changers, and few tutors. So there's that. That's supposed to be what is considered your bog standard pre-con, I guess is what they were calling it. Next is a bracket 3. So I keep saying tier, but it's brackets. They're brackets, kids. And it says beyond the strength of an average pre-con deck. So no mass land denial, no chaining extra turns, but there are some late game 2-card infinite combos allowed in this one. So that's pretty nice. And you are allowed 3 game changers. The last 2 I have a problem with. Bracket 4 is called optimize. It's high power commander. So you don't have any restrictions. You're not ruling out land denial, you're not ruling out extra turns or chaining extra turns. You go and it's high power commander. And then they have another bracket, which is CEDH, which they're kind of including in their bracket system now, which is high power with a very competitive and metagame focused mindset. Same rules as tier 4, just with a competitive mindset. So that's the brackets. Benjamin, I have feelings. Let's hear your feelings first, though, because I have a curiosity about how you feel, because we literally just came up with this on the fly, and I'm really curious to see how he feels.
I feel like I'm going to have feelings that a lot of people haven't had from what I've seen. That's, right. Don't crucify me for this.
No crucifixions.
My biggest issue
we're starting with issues.
With the bracket system.
Got it.
Is the important parts in the paragraphs talking about the bracket system and intentions was not put into the bracket quick look.
Yeah.
And the best way I can put that is I've seen plenty of either shorts or just videos in general of saying, I got a tier 2 deck that breaks the game.
Right.
Well, here's the thing about that. Specifically in bracket 2, in its full length description, it actually says that the game length for that is 9 to 10 turns. If you built a deck that can end the game on turn 3 or 5, you did not build a tier 2 or a bracket 2 deck. But in all fairness, the flashy bracket system does not list what the average game length should be. Mm-hmm. There are always going to be instances where it's like, I got a combo I should have never got. Once in 100 games will I get this card combination, because it's very hard to assemble everything. Those aren't the decks I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people who are like, I built the super consistent tier 2, will win all the time. You didn't build tier 2 then.
Yeah.
Sorry. Or bracket 2. God, that's going to suck.
I know. I keep throwing tier out, and it keeps throwing me off because tier in my brain is what makes sense.
So that is my biggest thing, is there are important parts in the whole multiple paragraphs for each bracket that explain more of what would become a tier or a bracket X deck that are not in there, and that will muddy the waters because people are going to use the quick guide when quickly deciding on what deck to play with a bunch of randos. They aren't going to go and dissect 3 paragraphs of information where a few of those sentences could have easily been put in there, such as tier 2 game length should be between 9 to 10 turns on average.
Mm-hmm.
Easy to put in there, guys. Come on.
Yeah, like turn length, like game length, and other small things like that should have been taken into consideration. But my biggest issue right now is, well, I have several pretty big issues, but the first of them being the bracket system seems great at a glance. It seems great, but it doesn't really address synergy. It doesn't address deck synergy, because a deck that is synergized very well will perform well above its weight class. A deck that has good synergies and good strategy in its building will perform well above what is considered tier 2 or tier 1 or whatever the case may be. And my biggest issue with that is that there's no real way to measure synergy. It's the same reason why, and if you guys are familiar with it, you'll kind of get what I'm saying, is Canadian Highlander. Canadian Highlander, they have like point values.
Yes.
For every single card that's in the game. Every single card in the game has a point value, and that point value goes toward and showing what exactly the deck can do and how powerful the deck is.
Well, 90%, it doesn't show synergy, but it doesn't suddenly make you a bracket 3 simply because you have a single card.
You hit a certain number of things, right?
It would be like, let's just use the One Ring example.
Mm-hmm.
You could have 300 points or even 200 points and
Mm-hmm.
include the One Ring in your deck.
Right.
And yet the point system kind of keeps you just have to ask, are you at 300 points or are you at...
Like, how many points is your deck
If
run?
there's a 200 point difference,
and again,
it's a pretty big difference.
Canadian Highlander doesn't necessarily address synergy either. It's one of the big reasons why I have issue with Canadian Highlander point system, because it doesn't address synergy. And the same with this, because at the end of the day, like I said previously, at what it ultimately boils down to is having a good turn 0 conversation. Just having a conversation with people that's open and honest and saying, hey, this is what my deck does, and this is the way it does it. Now, granted, in this article, this really long article, they go over the Rule 0 conversation, and they talk about kind of what I was just saying, like, hey, have a conversation with the people that you're talking to. Talk to them about the kinds of combinations that you are having in your deck in order to make it the tier that it currently is. And at the end of the day, it's just going to be a longer Rule 0 conversation, just because now they've put words to it and they put an outline to it to be able to have that conversation. Because now it's no longer a, hey, I'm going to have this conversation because, you know, I think people should have it. Now there's like a line on an article on the internet that says, hey, have this conversation before you start your game. It's almost a rule. A Rule 0 is almost a Rule 1.
I don't think it's going to make it longer.
I don't feel like it's going to be longer.
It requires you to know your deck better.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
But like, to be honest, I feel like you should already know your deck well.
You should.
And I feel like anyone who gets upset about any of the recent changes to Commander, they know their deck. Otherwise, they'd have no reason to get all upsetty spaghetti.
Yeah, but I think that at the end of the day, the reason why I have an issue with the system itself is because it doesn't speak to the synergies of a deck. Because again, a deck can be full of all common and uncommon cards and can still fight with the best of them. It's not going to compete at a tier 4, tier 5 level, but it's going, bracket 4, bracket 5 level. Those are words. And it's not going to do well. But in a casual game, it could roll face. Like, perfect example. He's an uncommon, but he's broke as hell. Finn the Fangbearer. Finn the Fangbearer is an uncommon from Kaldheim that is one of the harshest mono green commanders to deal with in casual.
Is he the gives people poison counters?
Yeah, because he deals with poison counters.
I don't think he's that bad though.
Well, he's not awful.
He's the commander you play if you don't mind losing. Let's be honest, your deck will definitely be able to take out 1 or 2 players.
Right.
But you just became everyone's number 1 problem.
Right. But at the same time, like if you synergize that deck with good cards that aren't necessarily all on the game changers list, which we still probably need to talk about, like it's going to perform well still. It's still going to perform well above its weight class, well above a tier 2, possibly even into a tier 3 and maybe even a low tier 4. But I feel like that you look at a system like this, it's just really hard to say, hey, this is a great way to do things when it doesn't take into consideration something that can't really have consideration put toward it.
The only reason I don't think synergy is as important is because it is impossible to tell people what is a synergy level for the decks.
Yeah, exactly.
Even with a point system. So it feels like, I don't know, to me it feels like a pointless conversation to have about their bracket system, because at that point we're complaining about them not succeeding in the impossible.
I guess that's fair. I was just kind of hoping that they'd have something that would be a little more elegant.
In concept, I like the point system more. The number one reason we didn't get that, if we're being 100% honest, is the company took over the rules committee for Commander, and they would have to pay people to get all of that ironed out. And every card they release in the future would have to have extra work put into it for those points.
Right.
Let alone bannings. The point system would be my favorite, but let's be honest with each other. They're a company. They were never going to put that amount of effort into it.
No, absolutely.
That's where if we want to do that, it's on us as a community.
Right.
We need to, and Canadian Highlander already does it. So we have the option. Part of me would love to try that because it sounds like a fun way to make sure everything's good. The problem with that is I live in America and I don't know anyone who plays Canadian Highlander.
No.
So
listen,
I would love
let's just Gulf of America it. We'll just take it. We'll rename it. It'll be great. It'll work out beautifully. Like, listen, I'm just saying it's an idea. We'll throw it around.
I would love to use a point system, I guess is my point, but it's not what I have currently with the people I play with. I will say this. This is perfect for this bracket system was not designed for you and your group of friends that regularly play together. Because let's be honest, if you have a friend who consistently is a douche during your Rule Zero conversation, you either don't play with him as much or you don't really play with him at all. And so that kind of solves itself. Those people naturally leave your group.
Yeah.
That being said, when I go with a bunch of randos, I like the idea of having something like this. And I like that it's simple because I can say, even if I don't agree with all their decisions on it, I can say, let's all play tier 3 or tier 2.
Right.
And once we do that, it makes it a lot easier because, especially since personally, the second, and it would be no different if you played a banned card.
Right.
The second you go, oh, I forgot this existed, but I'm playing it. You drop a 1 ring and we just agreed to tier 2 or bracket 2. I go, yeah, no, that is no different than cheating. You have a choice. You can exile that card forever and draw a new card. But it's either that or you forfeit the game.
Yeah.
I wouldn't treat that any differently than if you just cheated by grabbing a card out of your deck.
Right.
I like it because it helps people play with randos.
Yeah. So how do you feel about the tier 4 or 5 thing? The high power versus CEDH. Do you think that that's even like, is that something they should have even done? So
they should have just left it at tier 4.
Yeah. I think so.
Once literally it's the mindset difference. And that just doesn't help because mindset difference could literally, I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who don't have the mindset to play CEDH.
Right.
At that point, we're talking about the individual person. This is no longer a deck issue. This is a person issue.
Right.
And at that point, you're just banning players for being good at the game.
Yeah.
That's what that is. I just don't understand. I read the paragraphs on that, and while I got what they were trying to say, that didn't mean what they were saying was useful.
Right. It felt unnecessary. It felt like an unnecessary step, like, in putting it in. It's like, listen, if it's a mindset difference, just say, hey, we're playing tier 4, but I'm playing to win. I'm playing CEDH. And then that can be just what you do. But again, I feel like CEDH is its own format. It's not Commander. CEDH is its own thing. It should have its own rules and its own laws to essentially dictate how, I guess, for the lack of better phrasing, try-hard players want to play.
Well, and CEDH has always essentially been community run.
Yeah.
I mean, Commander in general has been mostly handled by the community. in general. This is very
Yeah.
recent, what we're seeing now, as far as timeline goes. But CEDH tournaments themselves are, from what I've noticed, or I've never heard of one happening personally in my area.
Mm-hmm.
I hear a lot of people playing it on whatever the online version of the camera pointing at your game is.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of it, but I know what you're talking about.
But yeah, no, the 4 and 5 they're the same thing.
It's the same but different.
I don't think those are even worth talking about.
Yeah, I agree. I'm gonna gloss over this because again, we're casuals, we're filthy casuals, and I don't play competitive. I don't even play high-powered commander. Because fun factoid, Moxfield is doing their own little mini iteration of the bracket system. So if you have your decks in Moxfield, it will tell you what bracket they're in, based solely upon the number of game changer cards that are in it, and nothing else. And it's great. So most of the decks that I have are tier 2, so it's pretty funny. But to bring that back, let's talk about game changers. So they came out with a list of 40 cards. Now, bear in mind, this is all a beta. We're talking and essentially shitting on Wizards of the Coast for something that's not even actual rules yet. It's just kind of a pre-trial for the rules. So they have a list of 40 cards that they put out for the Game of Commander. And there's a bunch of them. I'll put them up on the screen so you guys can read them. I don't want to go through all of these. All I can say is a few things. I have a few things to say on the matter. First and foremost, who decided only 2 red cards were good enough to be considered game changers? Because I mean, World Gorger Dragon's part of a 2-card combo. What's it called? Because all they have is
I know the answer to that, I think.
what's that?
If it's a game changer,
Yeah.
it has to essentially on its own
Change the game.
change the game.
Yeah, I feel like World Gorger Dragon does that.
No, it's a 2-card combo. You just said it.
Well, it's part of a 2-card combo. And what's it called? What's it called? Breach? What's it called?
Underworld Breach. That is
Underworld Breach?
definitely a 1-turn could get you
It's
really far.
it's part of a combo. It's not. It doesn't win it on its own.
I mean, it can. It could bring out a shit ton of cards from your graveyard.
Right, but it doesn't win the game on its own because you have to have mana and you have to be able to trigger Underworld Breach and have the right conditions in order to do that. Just same with Jessica's Will. Jessica's Will is the other one. It is a game-changing card. I will allow that. That one on its own will change the course of the game. But so will, oh God, what was the one that I was thinking of? And it's fucking gone. I had it and it disappeared. I don't know what to do. I'll have to put that up somewhere where I was thinking about it. But there are a lot more red cards, in my opinion, that could be set on that Game Changers list that should be on that list. And it doesn't make sense to me that they wouldn't have that card. Also, I can't help but notice a distinct lack of Toxrill on the black card set. And I don't know if y'all know, Toxrill's a kind of a bastard. And he sucks to play against. And I understand that he's a seven mana card, but he's also brutal in games. Like, I feel like that guy is a game changer on his own, because once he's on the field, he's hard to deal with. But at the same time, like, he's just a big booty creature with a cool effect, and you can technically just remove him from the field. But in casual, someone rolls up with Toxrill, that feels bad, man.
I mean, I feel like their list in general was like actively avoiding putting legendary creatures on the list.
Yeah, but they put Tegrid on there, which I
they
100%
did.
agree with that.
But he's close to ban worthy,
Yeah,
to be honest.
I think, and that's the thing. They're saying that this Game Changers list is supposed to be like a watch list for ban cards. So you have a bunch of stuff like a Cyclonic Rift, you've got Drannith Magistrate, you've got what's it called? Mana Vault, not Mana Crypt. And you got a bunch of other ones, but oddly enough, not the One Ring. The One Ring is not on that list. Hand
It's
to God,
not?
it is not. I'll show you.
No. I could have sworn it was on there.
Hand to God, broski.
There it is. The One Ring. Third down.
Wait, it's not on there.
It's on there. Third down.
Oh, I just can't read.
See, not experts.
I didn't see it on there, but no, that makes sense. Yeah, so yeah, it's definitely on there. But there's a bunch of them on here that are like, wow,
I don't
There's a
see a
lot
single
going
one
on.
on there I don't think doesn't deserve to be there.
well, I think they all deserve to be there, but I feel like the list should be longer. I feel like there's a lot more that could have been added to this list that weren't. Now, granted, it's a beta, so they're not wanting to just call out everything that everybody's ever complained about once.
Yeah.
So that's fine. I can get on board with that. But I feel like, especially like for the red cards specifically, like I feel like there are more red cards that could that make big changes.
I was more
like
surprised.
Kiki-Jiki, like is a big one, and he's a
What's
big.
funny
combo
is
piece.
all the cards I'm hearing you talk about, I don't actually know if I've ever played against.
Yeah, like Kiki-Jiki is super mean when you can create infinite copies of him, or you can create infinite copies if you have the ability to untap him. You can create infinite copies of creatures and do infinite combats, and you can do all kinds of craziness. It's wild the things that you can do with him. So like there are a lot of cards that I feel like do need to be added onto this list. But again, they're doing MagicCon soon, and they're going to be using this at MagicCon.
Anything that is part of a combo, though, is kind of instantly addressed by the 2-card combo thing, though.
Yeah, but like
So in the event that you're talking about, while I understand where you're trying to come from, every example you've brought up is a 2-card combo problem, with the exception of Toxrill.
Toxrill's just mean.
I have very mixed feelings on Toxrill, because I know someone who might watch this will say otherwise. I do not actually hate Toxrill. I hate it when someone pulls out a Toxrill deck after they see that everyone is playing creature-based decks.
But that's a guy who plays solely creature-based decks.
That's its own issue. If you watch to see what everyone else is going to play, and then and you see, oh, human tribal, another tribal, and then a token deck, I'm going to play Toxrill. You're kind of just being a douche at that point.
Yeah.
That's what I have a problem with. Now, if everyone's like, I'm playing pretty balanced decks where there's a pretty healthy balance of kinds of decks at the table, I feel like Toxrill's not as big of an issue.
Yeah.
Because Toxrill is going to get shit on hard by a lot of like more spell-based decks.
Yeah. He's got a definite weakness to spot removal.
Well, and if he's your face commander, then you just announce to everyone that the second you're anywhere close to 7 mana, just have that spot removal ready to go.
Yeah.
And you better believe I won't feel bad spot removing him 8 times.
Yeah.
And when you go, why aren't you letting me play the game? I'm going to respond with, I'm not stopping you from playing the game. You keep playing that card and I keep removing it.
Yep.
Maybe you should have built your deck to not rely on that one little bastard. If your version of playing the game is telling everyone else they can't play the game, don't be surprised when everyone else tells you can't play the game.
Yeah. If only there weren't like a section of Magic that was built specifically for that.
But I get it. I will say I dislike the idea of saying something like Toxrill is not somehow making you go up a bracket and mass land denial is. And I'm not, like, I get there's going to be plenty of people who think that that's a douchey way to look at the game. First off, I have a Phyrexian tattoo, so you know what kind of person I am.
Yep.
But second off, by telling everyone that until you are at essentially CEDH level, no mass land denial, you are essentially telling all the green decks that they have nothing to fear until then.
Yeah.
And that I actually have a problem with on here. I do think no mass land denial should be limited until you're at grade 3. But once you're... Also, actually, I just realized that Vornaclex can't be used until until bracket 4.
Yeah.
He's on the Game Changers list, but he also affects bracket 4.
Yeah.
Also, what's mass land denial? If I specify a specific land type, does that count?
Yeah.
Because I would argue that, well, Blood Moon is specifically saying everything but mountains, so that's a bit too specific. But the one I'm going to bring up is if I have a card, for example, that says all non-basics enter play tapped. I am not denying you lands. I am simply telling you as a monocolored deck that you three, the 3+ color decks, need to calm down just a little bit.
But also, fun fact to it, that was the other thing I was thinking of the Game Changer list that I thought was funny. They're saying no mass land denial, no mass land denial. Guess what's not on the fucking Game Changer list?
What?
Armageddon.
Well, it might as well be on the list because you can't use it till 4, which is no restrictions.
Exactly.
That's my point. They put things on there that might as well be there.
Yeah.
Because until 4, they actually are worse now that I'm saying it out loud. If you are a mass land denial, you are considered worse than a game changer. And first off, if you play Armageddon and you aren't able to like essentially end the game, that's more of you being a jerk during a game problem, and everyone at that table has the right to scoop and say, you can call this a win if you want. We just don't feel like continuing to play. But if you have Armageddon and you play that and you had some, and you just played if you play a Boros Charm followed by an Armageddon, that is you essentially, that's a game-winning move.
Dare we
Is
say
the way I see it.
Game changer?
So I'm okay with I would actually much rather something like Armageddon be a game changer. Or just put a whole new tab in the game changers and have in parentheses mass land denial. That would actually make me even be more okay with what counts as mass land denial. I think that's the thing that frustrates me, is what counts as mass land denial is up for debate. Because again, I would argue me telling you Yunarm basics can't come into play untapped is not me denying you a damn thing. I'm just telling you that all of your special expensive lands are now guild gates. I haven't denied you anything.
Yep.
I am just making them come into play tapped. And maybe that's their logic with Vorinclex.
Maybe.
Maybe the logic is you didn't take anything away. And if that's actually, I kind of want to look at what they mean by land denial. It's probably in here. I've probably been talking out of my ass this whole time.
The thing is, I've read it. I read it. And the thing with mass land denial, the reason why they're saying no mass land denial is because in casual games, generally going up against somebody who's like, hey, you don't get to have the lands that you need to play the game. Because we've all been in a situation where we've been turn 4 and we have 2 lands and everybody else is already popping off and already doing your thing. And all you can do is sit in the corner like a wounded puppy and hope and pray that nobody shits on your parade. And when you manufacture that from a deck builder standpoint, when you manufacture that bad feeling for somebody else, it doesn't feel good. So they made it a point to say, hey, land denial isn't fun. It's not fun for anybody. So maybe let's just not do that. And you know what? I can get on board with it. It's just, I feel a little bit bad because I was making a mass land denial deck for a little while. And now I've seen this and I'm like, well, I can squash that back real quick, because that's definitely not going to happen. But realistically speaking, like if we look into the whole idea of the game changers list, like it's a weird assortment of cards, and I think that eventually it will kind of even out and things will look good. But one thing that I do enjoy about it, and it sounds like I'm just shitting on this a lot, and I really don't want it to seem like I'm shitting on it a lot. I just have a curiosity as to where the thought process was with certain decision making. And like the reason why I like the game changers list is because it's like they said it in no uncertain terms. Hey, this is kind of a pre-ban list. Like if ban list stuff is going to happen, it's going to come from this list of cards unless something Nadu-esque sends to flounce into the meta, which isn't going to be likely because I hope Wizards that you learned from your mistakes with Nadu, because Jesus fucking Christ, that dude was nasty.
From what I'm seeing, okay, anything that destroys, exiles, or bounces mass amount of lands. So it's Armageddon, Ruination, Sunder, Winter, or Blood Moon. That is their list. So Vorinclex they don't count because he hasn't destroyed or exiled. So actually, I feel a little better now. However, I won't lie, my mono white stacks deck does want to destroy all your lands. Mm-hmm. But I would not do that unless doing that clenches a victory.
That's fair.
That is my way of saying the fight is over.
And I guess technically, like you were saying before, you'd like to have like a part of the list that's like, hey, these are land denial specifically. That kind of was.
I found it.
Yeah.
And
so
that makes me feel better. Again, we're not experts.
Yeah.
It's a lot of words to read through. Again, part of my problem was we got lots of paragraphs and then they gave us, quite frankly, way too few words for the brackets.
Yeah.
And the mass land destruction stuff, mass land denial I was expecting to find is actually all at the top. And I was looking through the bottom where they're explaining everything.
And realistically, like, I agree. I think that each one of those brackets, instead of being on one slide of a PowerPoint, could have each had their own.
The whole bracket system is one PowerPoint.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Instead of having one slide for all 5 of them, each one of them could have had their own slide to have a little more in-depth discussion about exactly what is expected from the players that are playing within those brackets. And you know what? I get it. But again, I think that this is a step in a direction. I'm still not sure if it's good or bad. because I'm in the camp with you where I would love to have a point system. It's not perfect. It doesn't measure synergies. It doesn't measure a lot of things. But if there were a consistent system that was like, hey, these are what these cards are worth. This is what they add to your deck. This is what they don't. This is, let's say, 5 points, right? And the total of your deck is the total of the accumulated cards therein. And cards that are powerful, like Toxrill, like Tergrid, like Armageddon, each one of those would be, let's say 50, 60, 70 points. I'm just making random numbers up here. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But like those points. So then if you add all those things together and you have a bunch of Grixis good stuff, it's like, hey, this is a 600-point deck or a 700-point deck. This is really good.
God forbid 1,000 point.
Yeah, God forbid 1,000-point deck. Like, it's like, hey, I'm playing CEDH. This is a 1,500 points. Somebody's like, I have Toxrill.
I'm playing unicorns.
I hope I win. But then like you have this rough idea of like, okay, this is the caliber of deck I'm coming across. Because out of 100 card singleton format, generally speaking, about 60 of the cards that are in your deck are going to have a value, because my presumption is that lands would not have value. But that could be different. I don't know how Canadian Highlander works. I'm an American. I don't do Canadian. Anyway, but like generally speaking, if there's 60 cards, and let's say the bottommost value you can have for a card, a basic ass common card that's not super great, is like 2 points. Right? Let's just say for shit.
I mean, I think 0 points is what some of them probably are.
I mean, some of them probably are, but if you have to give a points value to something that's like a Savannah Lion, that dude's probably like a 2.
Yeah.
So, like, a land is a 0, a basic land is a 0. A non-basic land, I guess, would probably have a value. But, like, let's even say, for instance, that's the case, then maybe 75 of the 100 cards in your deck are there. And let's say everything is a 2, bare bones minimum, you have 150 points.
Yeah.
You know that this deck is trash because it's 150 points. But then you start realizing, okay, 400 points is pretty close to casual, and 600 points is pretty close to a little bit above casual. Anything that's about 800-ish points is probably going to be pretty close to high powered, and anything that's like 900 points plus, again, round numbers, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, is going to be like CEDH. So like having a point system like that, though it may not take into consideration strategies, combat tricks, combos, things like that, I feel like it's a more accurate representation of the cards that you have compiled together.
You know what I just realized?
What's that?
They could have easily had a bracket 5. You know all they had to do?
What?
All cards allowed.
I mean, fair. Yeah. But then
it just hit me that it's like only banned cards aren't allowed in these two, and then it's a mindset difference. I was like, wait a minute. You could banned 5 could be actually 5 could be you can have up to like 2 banned cards in your deck.
That would be an interesting way of going about it.
So not all banned cards, but you can have up to 2 banned cards in your deck. That actually might have helped make people a lot more less upsetty spaghetti at the idea of like they're one of those cards they love so much. Like suddenly you can play Grizzlebrand, but everyone agreed to play tier 5. So like no getting upset here, bro.
I just feel like CEDH for me is like it's just supposed to be the everything that is allowed. So nothing on the ban list, nothing that's going to be stupid powerful, but just playing tier 4 at its highest level.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Tier 4 should be like maybe CEDH.
Yeah.
And then tier 5 is just, you can have up to 2 banned cards.
Call it fucking unhinged. Call tier 5 unhinged, and it's like, get ready to go, motherfuckers. Everything's allowed. Ban list, unhinged cards, everything's allowed. And just let people go nuts.
Build a laughing hyena deck.
Yeah, exactly. Do whatever you want to do at that point. But I think like final thoughts for me is that it's a direction, and we're gonna see how it goes in Chicago. Because worst case scenario, it doesn't succeed. They're like, well, that sucked. Let's try something else. And maybe we get the point system that we want. Best case scenario, they go, okay, we've talked to a bunch of people. They said it sucks. We agree. Let's see if we can amend this. And who knows? Maybe we'll get something good out of it. Maybe something nice will come out of it. But realistically, I'm not holding my breath. Like, I'm not holding my breath for it. I think at the end of the day, it's just going to be have the Rule Zero conversation. Say, hey, this is what I consider to be pretty standard mid-tier, and don't be a dick about it. You know, don't lie to people, because if you're lying to people, you're aware. We've talked about this in the past.
That's a person problem.
That's a person problem, not a game problem. But I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of hoping for the best and planning for the worst. But at the end of the day, I mean, if all goes well, then who knows? We might have an actual usable bracket system after, I think it's this weekend, because I think MagicCon is this weekend.
I don't know about that part. I'm not going.
I don't.
I work for a living. I can't go.
Yeah, same. The fact that we're even doing this right now is pointless. But whatever. You know. But yeah, what are you thinking? Final thoughts wise, what's your thoughts?
My final thoughts wise is it is good it is better than what we had for its purpose, because it allows players to have a very specific starting point of what they are okay with playing with.
Right.
And that is good, but it needs to be more specific. It looks like they tried to be vague. That was probably not in an attempt not to piss off people. Because sadly we saw what happened when a bunch of people's favorite toys got taken away from them with the last ban list. And I think that was their goal. And yet they didn't achieve anything because they went too far in the other direction. Right. And what they needed to do is they needed to be more specific, and they needed to include a lot of the information that is in paragraphs, not even in the tier part, in the slides. Each slide should be its own PowerPoint page, and it should take... So the higher tier you go, there should be less to read. The lower tier you go, there should be more to read, which means the middle of the road, which is 3, should be a good in-between.
Right.
And I will say that instead of everyone's deck being a 7, now everyone's deck is probably going to be said that's a 3. And I'm only saying that because I think that's how a lot of people would describe their decks. I don't think most people are going to describe their decks as, I can't win until turn 10. Most people are going to describe their decks as the game usually lasts till turn 6 to 8. And that would put you in 3. And that's where that could have been very usefully put in there. But that's pretty much my closing thoughts is it's a good starting point. It'll help for randos. It is not for your dedicated group of players that knows how to play nice with each other. You can use it for that. I intend to ask people even in my dedicated group. But that is what it's there for. And you're never going to be able to take player skill and deck building skill out of the equation. So that's always going to be a thing.
Right.
So I don't think about that. Especially as someone who goes out of their way to take certain color combinations and go out of their way to make something good with. I like it for what it is.
Yeah.
But what it is people are misrepresenting it as for what it is. And I think that's because everyone wanted to jump on it quickly for a video. But I also think it's because they screwed up by not making things clearer by putting everything condensed in specific parts of the thing to read. Because when you have what a mass land denial is, and then your description for why Vorticlux is a game changer, and those are on opposite ends of your
spectrum,
5 pages of words I gotta read.
Yeah.
Then of course I'm not gonna get everything. You created this. It is your jumbled mess. Fix it. But yeah, that's where I'm at. It needs to be refined. They rushed this out, is what I'm confident they did. And part of that, I'm sure, was a business decision because they had to pay someone to do this.
Yeah, and I'm sure that they probably were trying to rush to get it out before MagicCon so that way they could start kind of getting an idea of what it's going to be. And you know what? Even if this is a half-cocked idea, at least they had the courtesy to say, hey, this is a beta. We're starting off small. Let's see where this goes. So, I mean, Wizards, good luck. I hope it works out, but I'm not going to hold my breath. That's kind of the long and short of it for me.
I do think the feedback from this is going, especially with how negative everyone being, will end with something better. And I'm hoping part of that is just their communication becomes clearer.
Well, let's hope and pray for the best, boys and girls. In the meantime, it's been a blast. We will catch you guys on the next one.
And don't forget, what color is a mirror?
What color is a mirror?
It is all of the colors, damn it.